The Iliad Book 6 Excerpt. Alexander Pope said, and passed with sad presaging heart to seek his spouse, his souls far dear apart. At home he sought her, but he sought in vain. She, with one maid of all her menial train, had thence returned, and, with her second joy, the young Astyanax, the hope of Troy, pensive she stood on Iliad's towery height, beheld the war, and sickened at the sight. There her sad eyes in vain her lord explore, or weep the wounds her bleeding country bore. But he, who found not whom his soul desired, whose virtue charmed him as her beauty furred, stood in the gates, and asked what way she bent her parting steps. If to the fane she went, where late the mourning matrons made resort, or sought her sisters in the Trojan court. Ampersand quo. Not to the court and quo, replied this attendant train, ampersand quo. Nor, mixed with matrons, to Minerva's fane. To Iliad's steepy toe single quotar she bent her way, to mark the fortunes of the doubtful day. Troy fled, she heard, before the Grecian sword. She heard, and trembled for her absent lord. Distracted with surprise, she seemed to fly, fear on her cheek and sorrow in her eye. The nurse attended with her infant boy, the young Astyanax, the hope of Troy. Ampersand quo. Hector, this heard, returned without delay. Swift through the town he trod his former way, through streets of palaces and walks of state, and met the mourner at the Scone gate. With haste to meet him sprung the joyful fair, his blameless wife, ampersand quo. Shans wealthy heir, Cilicianth begrady, ampersand quo. Shan swayed, and Hippoplacus wide extended shade. The nurse stood near, in whose embraces pressed his only hope hung smiling at her breast, whom each soft charm and early grace adorn, fair as the new-born star that gilds the morn. To this loved infant Hector gave the name Scamandrius, from Scamander's honored stream. Astyanax the Trojans called the boy, from his great father, the defense of Troy. Silent the warrior smiled, and pleased, resigned to tender passions all his mighty mind. His beauteous princess cast a mournful look, hung on his hand, and then dejected spoke. Her bosom labored with a boding sigh, and the big tear stood trembling in her eye. Ampersand quo. To daring prince. Ah, whither dost thou run? Ah, too forgetful of thy wife and son. And thinkest thou not how wretched we shall be, a widow I, a helpless orphan he? For sure such courage length of life denies, and thou must fall, thy virtue's sacrifice. Greece and her single heroes strove in vain. Now hosts oppose thee, and thou must be slain. Oh, grant me, gods, ere Hector meets his doom, all I can ask of heaven, an early tomb. So shall my days in one sad tenor run, and end with sorrows as they first begun. No parent now remains, my griefs to share, no father's aid, no mother's tender care. The fierce Achilles wrapped our walls in fire, laid Thebae waste, and slew my warlike sire. His fate compassion in the victor bred. Stern as he was, he yet revered the dead, his radiant arms preserved from hostile spoil, and laid him decent on the funeral pile. Then ride a mountain where his bones were burned, the mountain nymphs the rural tomb adorned. Jove's sylvan daughters bade their elms bestow a barren shade, and in his honor grow. Ampersand quo. By the same arm my 7 brave brothers fell. In one sad day beheld the gates of hell, while the fat herds and snowy flocks they fed, amid their fields the hapless heroes bled. My mother lived to bear the victor's bands, the queen of Hippoplacia's sylvan lands. Redeemed too late, she scarce beheld again her pleasing empire and her native plain, when, oppressed by life-consuming woe, she fell a victim to Diana's bow. Ampersand quo. Yet while my Hector still survives, I see my father, mother, brethren, all, in thee, alas. My parents, brothers, kindred, all, once more will perish if my Hector fall. Thy wife, thy infant, in thy danger share, oh, prove a husband's and a father's care. That quarter most the skilful Greeks annoy, where yon wild fig trees join the wall of Troy. Thou from this toe single quotar defend this important post. There Agamemnon points his dreadful host, that past Tydides, Ajax, strive to gain, and there the vengeful Spartan fires his train. Thrice our bold foes the fierce attack have given, or led by hopes, or dictated from heaven. Let others in the field their arms employ, but stay my Hector here, and guard his Troy. Ampersand quo. The chief replied, Ampersand quo. That post shall be my care, not that alone, but all the works of war. How would the sons of Troy, in arms renowned, and Troy's proud dames, whose garments sweep the ground, attaint the luster of my former name, should Hector basely quit the field of fame? My early youth was bred to martial pains, my soul impels me to this embattled plains. Let me be foremost to defend the throne, and guard my father's glories, and my own. Yet come it will, the day decreed by fates, how my heart trembles while my tongue relates. The day when thou, imperial Troy, must bend, and see thy warriors fall, thy glories end. And yet no dire presage so wounds my mind, my mother's death, the ruin of my kind, not Priam's hoary hairs filled with gore, not all my brothers gasping on the shore, as thine, Andromache. Thy griefs I dread. I see thee trembling, weeping, captive led. In our javelins our battles to design, and woes, of which so large a part was thine. To bear the victor's hard command, or bring the weight of waters from Hyperia's spring. There, while you groan beneath the load of life, they cry, Behold the mighty Hector's wife. Some haughty Greek, who lives thy tears to see, embitters all thy woes by naming me. The thoughts of glory past and present shame, 1,000 griefs, shall waken at the name. May I lie cold before that dreadful day, pressed with a load of monumental clay. Thy Hector, wrapped in everlasting sleep, shall neither hear thee sigh, nor see thee weep. Ampersand quo. Thus having spoke, this illustrious chief of Troy stretched his fond arms to clasp the lovely boy. The babe clung crying to his nurse's breast, scarred at the dazzling helm and nodding crest. With secret pleasure each fond parent smiled, and Hector hasted to relieve his child. The glittering terrors from his brows unbound, and placked the beaming helmet on the ground. Then kissed the child, and, lifting high in air, thus to the gods preferred a father's praise single quotar, Ampersand quo. O thou, whose glory fills this ethereal throne, and all ye deathless powers single quotares. Protect my son. Grant him, like me, to purchase just renown, to guard the Trojans, to defend the crown, against his country's foes the war to wage, and rise the Hector of the future age. So when, triumphant from successful toils, of heroes slain he bears the reeking spoils, whole hosts may hail him with deserved acclaim, and say, this chief transcends his father's fame, while pleased, amidst the general shouts of Troy, his mother's conscious heart o'erflows with joy. Ampersand quo. He spoke, and fondly gazing on her charms, restored the pleasing burthen to her arms. Soft on her fragrant breast the babe she laid, hushed to repose, and with a smile surveyed. The troubled pleasure soon chastised by fear, she mingled with the smile a tender tear. The softened chief with kind compassion viewed, and dried the falling drops, and thus pursued, Ampersand quo. Andromache. My soul's far better part, why with untimely sorrows heaves thy heart? No hostile hand can antedate my doom, till fate condemns me to the silent tomb. Fixed is the term to all the race of earth, and such the hard condition of our birth. No force can then resist, no flight can save. All sink alike, the fearful and the brave. No more, but hasten to thy tasks at home, there guide the spindle, and direct the loom. Me glory summons to the martial scene, the field of combat is the sphere for men. Where heroes war, the foremost place I claim, the first in danger as the first in fame. Ampersand quo.